Afternoon and a warm welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. Just a reminder, if you have your mobiles, if you could switch them off, as it does interfere with our recording. And we welcome those that may be listening online because we're on air. So those in their home or their office that are listening to, welcome to you as well. Please be seated. Thank you. So I have one apology. That's from Councillor Dawkins. Any declaration of interest? No, not today. Confirmation minutes. Somebody move the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 6th of Feb. Deputy Mayor, thank you, and Councillor Harris. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. We have no deputations, no petitions. We have a community report, or two. So first of all, Ella French. Welcome. She's from the project team member from the Keep Your Skin Gorgeous. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Ella from Team Gorgeous, from our project Keep Your Skin Gorgeous. Our project, we are from participants from the Emerging Community Leaders Program, and so we wanted to implement a project that was really meaningful to the Tasmanian community. Given our quite high rates of skin cancer in Tasmania, we wanted to implement something that would be really accessible and free to the public. So we installed a free fixed sunscreen dispenser at the Cataract Gorge. So it's underneath the Basin Cafe next to the lockers there. We chose there because we thought it would be quite easy for people to get to, and also it could be locked away. We had a launch event on the 4th of January where our mayor came and he spoke and officially opened the ceremony, cut the ribbon, and we had the sunscreen installed for a pilot of the month in January. So we decided to run it as a pilot to see how it would go and sort of assess if it could be installed sort of ongoing. So the month has been up, the pilot is done. We have received some really good feedback through our group and also through the council themselves. We were very, very lucky to work with the council, who actually printed the signage for us, installed the signage, made sure everything was all good to go. Unfortunately, the sign is a little bit damaged from the sunscreen up against it. The sun has faded it a bit. So we're just now reassessing what we can do moving forward, if we keep a sunscreen dispenser at the gorge or if we move it up to somewhere like the pool. We're just sort of in conversations around that, or if it's something that the lifeguards could have. But overall, we believe having a sunscreen dispenser there worked really well, because we went through 9 litres of sunscreen in the month, which we believe was quite a good amount, and shows that there is a need to have free sunscreen around. So we will assess it moving forward, but we do just want to thank the council very much so for being involved, and also Cancer Council Tasmania for sponsoring the free sunscreen. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for to your team as well for doing that and for the initiative. It's fantastic, and it was really great to be involved. So thank you for that as well. And now I hand over to the Deputy Mayor, who will introduce, he's part of the panel to do with the university scholarship. So, Deputy.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors would be aware that we are very fortunate to be able to support students from our municipality by way of the City of Launceston University of Tasmania scholarship. And in 2019, we supported a student, Millie, and she wrote a letter to the panel and to the university and to the council generally, recognising the support that had entrusted to her for the 2019 year, and the funding is for up to 3 years of study. And the letter was so good that I thought it would be lovely to welcome Millie along to share that herself. But before we do that, I'd like to welcome from the University of Tasmania, Rebecca Cuthill, who is the Director of Fundraising and Marketing.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Look, it's a real pleasure to speak to you all here this morning on behalf of the university, and I'm going to say a few brief words quite generally about the scholarship program at the university. Look, I consider myself particularly fortunate. As the Deputy Mayor mentioned, I'm the Associate Director of Fundraising at the university, and I believe philanthropy has a real power to change lives and shape our community. So before we hear from Millie, as we've heard, I've been asked to say a few words about the scholarship program at the university. So I'm pleased to actually say the University of Tasmania has one of the most robust scholarship programs. We provide over 900 awards and prizes worth about $7 million each year. So the continued success of this program is, I think, a reflection of our alumni, our friends, and our supporters, including government and businesses. So what does the program do? Well, it provides significant financial and academic support, and wherever possible creates opportunities for someone to attend university who might otherwise not be able to do so. So our aim at the university is to offer as many students as possible a scholarship so they can embark on life-changing education. So how does the process all work? To be considered for a scholarship, as Millie would know, students have to complete a comprehensive application, provide details regarding their study aspirations, community involvement, financial circumstances, if applicable, and complete a resume and academic results. And once awarded, scholarships do have an immediate effect on students' lives. So for the Council, since 2012, your ongoing support has shown a real belief in the power of education. You currently support, and I'm sure I'm telling you things you already know, 15 Springboard to higher education bursaries. These are supporting students from their Year 10 to Year 11 to Year 12 journey and hopefully on to university. And of course you funded many undergraduate scholarships over this period as well. In the scholarship space, in the last couple of months, over 2,500 students have lodged more than 12,000 applications for scholarship support, showing, I think, the number of people who are interested in coming to university, but also the need for scholarships as well. In our local community in 2019, there are approximately 95 university-funded scholarships to students who are studying in the north and the northwest. The university is really aiming to do more to ensure our program is actually responsive to the needs of young people in our community. So we've recently redesigned our scholarship program, and the emphasis really now on improving access for students who face significant economic, social or political barriers to higher education. So we're in the early stages of putting this project in place and achieving these critical goals. So I'd just like to end by thanking the City of Launceston for your support over many years. But like you, I'm very keen to hear from your current student, Millie Shammy.
Hi. I would like to start by saying thank you to all who made my scholarship possible. Thank you to His Worship the Mayor, Andrew Albert Van Zetten, Deputy Mayor Danny Gibson and councillors. Because of you, I was fortunate enough to receive the scholarship, which allows me to afford uni resources such as my English text and my laptop and transport costs. Uni was a big step for me, made pretty much only possible by your generosity with the scholarship. Being in education again has given me purpose and inspiration, and I can proudly say that last year I started believing in myself more, which I think has helped contribute to me finding a job after 4 years of unemployment. Such new stability in my life has made me really happy and proud of who I've become. 2019 was easily the best year of my life, and I'm really looking forward to my second year of uni starting on Monday. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that update, Millie, and we wish you well in your future studies for this year and whatever the future holds. So, all the best. We're now on to public question time. So any questions from the public? Yep, go to the microphone, please.
I acknowledge the Aboriginal custodians and traditional owners of the land that we're holding this meeting on. I'm Nancy Sarisia, 25 West Park Drive. I also own 17 Lawrence Street. I know, Mayor, I'm asking your permission actually to ask a question and to have it answered. I know generally you say this will be discussed later, but I feel maybe that it can be discussed now to clarify a few matters. I'm directing it to the Planning Director, if he or she is here, or else to Miss Small.
Yeah, could you the question, please?
Question? Am I allowed to ask a question?
You're allowed to ask a question.
I'd just like an answer, that's all.
Well, I'll give an answer whether you like it or not, it's another thing.
Right,
but anyway.
right. If the sports and recreation class, I'm talking about 23 Lawrence Street, DA 07252019, if the sports and recreation class is granted and a gym later on applies to establish there in the future, does this mean this application will not be advertised for the public to comment on?
Yeah, that'll come out in the debate. I'm quite sure of that, so thank you.
Okay, next question, which I'd also like to answer now, please, if possible, to the Director of Planning or to Ms Small. In the proposal by CPD on behalf of OsteoStrong, it is stated 3 new car parking spots will be created. In the recommendation by Ms Small, and I say this respectfully, it's stated that 4 spots will be added. Where are they? 3 are next to the entrance of the business. Where is the 4th one? And is it within 3 metres of the Cemetery Street frontage as shown on the proposed plans?
Yeah, as the other previous one. Councillors have heard that question and they will ask that during our debate shortly. Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
Can I hold it?
Yeah, yes, certainly.
Okay. My question is about the gorge. We had the issue raised, mentioned this morning about sons care. I'd like to raise the issue of the relator, which has been in my head for a long, long time. Having experienced first aid paid for by the council, which I really appreciated over the years, I do have a concern that we don't have a defibrillator at the gorge, and with the increased populations, also the fact that we can get people by ambulance, yes, but we need to sometimes take those things that are lifesavers to the people. The people are scattered throughout the gorge. The gorge is increasing in use for wild sports, more extreme sports, and the population is denser at certain times of the year. My concern is we had a big accident last year, which was a horrendous thing, with someone with a tree. My concern is that we're getting an older demographic as well, continually using the gorge as recreation and rest, and we have no defibrillator.
Thank you. That's the question?
So my question is it possible, when they're plentifully available, how much is the cost of a life when they're $2,000 each, to have one based at the gorge within access for people to use?
That's a good question and I'm sure we'll follow that up. Thank you very much.
Another quick question. Meeting access. At the beginning of the year I was unable to listen to the meeting. There was a problem with the audio. I usually listen to them. If I don't, I'm not here. And I wondered if there was a proposition at any time to look at perhaps having 2 or 3 meetings at night to provide access for the whole community to access council meetings.
Yeah, that's something for the councillors to consider and I'm sure they'll bring it up should they feel they would like to do that. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you. Yes? Sorry?
So there are 3 questions. My name is Robin Smith. I work at Coffee Republic in Brisbane Street Mall. First question is about the parking app that council uses. Successful as it is, easy to park. I've worked out from Charles Street to Cemetery Street is about 67 parking spaces. They're 1 hour each. They cover 14 multi-bays, and that's about 4 city blocks. All of those spaces being 1 hour mean that once you've used an hour, a customer can't return to any of those spaces. How long is that period before they can return? So if you were to stop up in Charles Street, you couldn't return to any of those 67 spaces.
Yeah, we'll take that one on notice. Thank you.
Next 2 questions are about the on-street vendor policy, dining. It sets out the objectives. Do you think the objectives are met in Eat Street, up on High Street? We previously, Coffee Republic, were a vendor up there, but we haven't been issued with, for subsequently a couple of years, haven't had a permit to operate there. There are, I think, 4 permanent ones up there. I don't see very much in the way of activity up there. Also down in the Civic Square, another area with on-street vendor, we've got a van of aromas immediately in front of a cafe, a fixed premises cafe. Highly unfortunate that they can undercut them on costs. How are those two policies, would you say, that working with regard to those two sites, please?
I've had no complaints from here at all, from the library, if that's what you're talking about, so working well, very positive. I haven't heard anything about Eat Street, have you?
We need to seek a briefing there.
But we can get some information on that and ask the question.
Thank you. In the past, with the Brisbane Street Mall, as far as putting on-street vendors in, it was the, if you like, convention. This is about 20 years ago. It last came up. We being a non-existing operator, were one of two that were invited if we had any expressions of interest in trading on the street. At the time, 20-something years ago, we didn't. However, Pages did, and they went ahead and did it. Subsequent to that, we haven't had anything. Would that essential received convention, if you like, still be in place, or is that?
I couldn't answer that. We would have to find out. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Well before my time. So thank you. Any other questions? So we move on. Under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, Council acts as the planning authority in regard to the items included in the agenda under item 9, Planning Authority. So 9.1, we have no speakers, I believe, for 9.1. So somebody happy to move the motion, a motion? Move, Councillor Mackenzie, as is. Councillor Finlay, wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I do, Mr Mayor. We visited the site this morning. It's zoned residential, or general residential, I think. It's right in the middle of Ravenswood, and therefore, I guess, was planned at some stage to become a residential development. Reviewing the comments made by the officers, there aren't that many discretions that have been put in place. The assessments have been made in regards to traffic management, which I think was a key issue. There are a number of things which look through the representation about, the type of housing that might be built there. We have no control over that at this point in time, on the basis that we need to wait until somebody puts in an application for building a house as to determine whether it's appropriate or not, and then it'll go through the planning scheme in its normal way. And there are a number of other issues in regards to, I guess there's been some discretion in regards to the size of lots, where the majority of them fit the standard size for a planning scheme. There are some smaller lots so that diverse housing can actually be provided on the block and fit within the discretions used in the council. So in my view, all of the questions that were asked by the representatives, I think, have been adequately answered in the responses by the officers, and I'm happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay? Councillor Soward?
Thanks, Mayor. And I am very happy to speak in support of this, and I'm sure, like other councillors, I did have some people contact me with some concerns. I'm going to start with those first. One of the concerns that was raised with me was regarding the fact that it's a rocky area, very rocky area, and the use of explosives and stuff for demolition work. Just to, again, I think often when people bring things to us for clarification, it's because they don't necessarily understand that council it's not necessarily a council matter. So just for the purposes of illustrating it, Mr Mayor, on page 25 of our papers, it does spell out very, very clearly that blasting is not a matter that council controls, and the developer will have to abide by the requirements of WorkSafe Tasmania. So that's the body that regulates that, and obviously, again, to alleviate any angst, obviously there are processes that they have in place around who can do that sort of work. The other thing, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Mackenzie touched on that in his remarks, was around the parking and the fact that it's going to get a lot busier than what it is. I would say, and I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes you've got to say obvious things to make them obvious, any activity on that site's going to be busier than what's there now. So I think that's something that's often very common when we deal with things at council, where there's a new subdivision going in. People do have some angst and some nervousness around that sort of stuff, where you've had nothing and then all of a sudden you're going to have something. So the other thing too that was mentioned was, again, with people that contacted me and also in the representations, it talked about you know, the idea of housing commission, housing as such, and I directed the people that contacted me to the work that's going on in that space at the moment. And Mr Mayor, you would remember, and it's been obviously documented here previously last year, I think it might have been Richard Bingham came and gave a presentation to council about the way that, you know, and I use the word housing department, housing commission, because they're terms that people are familiar with how they actually do their developments these days, not like happened back in the 1970s or 80s where, you know, large chunks of the social housing was opened up. Now the housing is dispersed across suburbs and across communities. So I wanted to just start with that because they were the things that that people raised with me, and obviously many of those are mentioned in the submissions to this one. One of the key things, Mr Mayor, in this document, as you work your way through it, for those who might be listening or are here in the chamber today, when you go through it, and our staff have assessed it, you know, we see words like consistent, and where it relies on performance criteria, it complies, and that's really, really important to highlight that, because again, as I said out there, some of the concern came from the fact that people were saying that, oh no, that wouldn't comply. The last thing I'd say, Mr Mayor, which again is very timely given we're dealing with this matter today, and whilst it's not something that's considered as part of this submission, but it needs to be said, on the news this morning, and in fact on the news most mornings, we hear about the lack of affordable housing that there is at the moment in the community. Well, this is something that's designed to enable people to get into the housing market, some of which might be for the first time for young home buyers, or also for others who may now be in a position to get into something that's affordable. So I think that's a great thing. Very topical, as I said, on the ABC this morning, and needs to be mentioned. So I'm very happy to support it, and I look forward to comments from others around the table, but also seeing this come to fruition if passed here today. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, question?
Question, Mayor, thank you. As we continue to evolve with the statewide planning scheme into the future, and I guess as a progressive council, what is the relationship between public transport and the scheme? And how do we see those two intersecting into the future? And what ways are we able to, I guess, provide for establishments such as this? Was mentioned in some of the representations. There is a bus service there. It's referenced that it's not a consideration as part of the scheme. But how do we kind of bring those two things closer together as we evolve with developments such as this?
Thank you.
I'm not sure there's a specific answer I can give you on that. That's quite a broad topic about integration of land use planning and public transport. And it's obviously something that we're dealing with the transport vision and other things, and our ongoing discussions with Metro and parking policy and encouraging mode switching. And so there's quite a few elements to that. In this instance, buses won't go into this proposed development because they can't turn at the end. So these people to access public transport would have to go to a stop in the existing network, and providing that that's within a reasonable walking distance, which possibly up to 400 metres or something like that might be acceptable, then we would consider that is... 500? Well, then we would consider that is served by public transport for the purposes of the planning scheme.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close?
Well, because I think that comments made earlier about sort of providing opportunity, I guess homelessness is something we've talked about, and affordable housing and housing stock. And we had a meeting with the Cabinet earlier in the week talking about that very subject. And I think that anything that brings additional housing stock into the market where there's a perceived shortage of it, and the opportunity of different levels of housing opportunities, I think, for people is something which is very important. I think very good part of our planning scheme to try and make sure we encourage that. This development, in my view, does that. To answer Councillor Gibson's comment, obviously, the beauty of this is there's actually a pathway that's being built through to the main thoroughfare and where public transport is. So I think that the vision of this particular subdivision actually works well with that. My view in public transport and other things, transport vision, hopefully will start to solve those sorts of things. But again, our job as elected representative is to hear what the people say, and if there's a requirement or a need for more, it's up to us to then lobby Metro for different routes or greater frequency, I think.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 9.2. We do have some speakers for 9.2. And just a reminder, that's 2 minutes time limit that you get, and just ask you to be respectful. So first of all, Nancy.
Nancy Sarisia, 25 West Park Drive, West Launceston, and 17 Lawrence Street, Launceston. Osteo Strong has clearly chosen to market itself to its potential clients as not being a gym or a fitness centre. Surely it has the right to do this. It emphasises no sweat, no pain. The term fitness centre, which implies cardiovascular exercise and muscle building activity, along with group classes, is detrimental to the core values of the business. Now, on the other hand, planning has decided to rebrand Osteo Strong as a fitness centre, when it could have easily slotted it into a business class use. Post office staff are trained, but they're not required to have a degree or are travel agents, yet they are classed in business and professional. Should a health food shop or a health food supplement business be put into sports and recreation class because they promote a healthy lifestyle? Sports and recreation class use is what we're concerned about, not this good business. If this is granted and the next application for this site is for a gym, we will be denied a voice, as the application will not need to be advertised publicly. We won't be able to express our concerns. We'll be at the mercy of the assigned planning officer. Perhaps the planning officer will be like the last one who assessed the F45 gym proposal last year, and he will decide a 5:15 a.m. start will not affect the amenity of nearby residents. In other words, we're offered no protection of amenity if sports and recreation class is approved for this site.
Thank you. Now, Rosemary.
Thank you. If I may, I could just read a quick note from Andrew Barnett, who was not able to be here today, and he's from 44 Cemetery Street. He says, again, I have concerns regarding the change of use with this development application. After the DA 0370 was retracted, it appears that the developer is trying to backdoor approach to the change of use. I believe the proposed development should be under business and professional services, not sport and recreation. One would assume that all new clients would have to go through a consultation prior to receiving one-on-one coaching on specific equipment within the studio. As I understand, all existing physiotherapy and osteopath practices have been classified under business and professional services. Most of all, if not all, have consulting and treatment rooms as well as an exercise studio. To quote from the Osteo Strong website, Osteo Strong is not a gym. Osteo Strong are on Facebook under medical and health. As I submitted in the previous DA, most gymnasiums now have loud music playing, and this is still of concern with this site if changed to a gym. The trading hours do not fit within the regulations on the weekends, and this also needs to be changed. In conclusion, I believe that this business would be a great fit for this site if the change of use is correct.
Thank you.
And that's Amanda. And for me, I'm concerned that you may think that we're all serial complainers, but really we're not. We're very happy for Osteo Strong to commence trading, but we don't understand why it's been given a sport and recreation classification, and also extraordinary 7-day-a-week trading hours instead of a business and professional status. Some of us think it's a cunning plan to ease in a gym in the future. Others reckon that the planners had to find a suitable subheading and hit on fitness studio as a near enough is good enough. Osteo Strong clearly states they are not a gym, and I'm sure they regard themselves as a professional business. Therefore, is sport and rec right for them? According to the planning report, Osteo Strong mainly treat people with osteoporosis, which is neither sporty nor recreational. Can a sport and rec classification apply to this business? And would that be legal if it's not really sport and rec? The thing is, once given a sport and rec label with extended trading hours, then that's here to stay. This could pave the way for a gym in the future. All it would take would be a change of hours, a process which I believe would not be advertised or open for public discussion. We ask the application to be given a business and professional classification, therefore, and there must be a subheading somewhere to suit it, with reasonable trading hours. Why would OsteoStrong need Sundays when they have from 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Friday and Saturdays? This would give us as much protection for the future as we could hope for. Thank you.
Thank you. Class?
Thank you. My name's Klaus Visser. I live in Exeter, just up the river, but I have a property at 38 Rossmoyne Street. I'm the part owner of OsteoStrong. You've just heard several submissions which obviously are the sticking point in relation to all the submissions that have been put. All the other issues have been dealt with. This OsteoStrong is a global company. It's a franchise. It's based in America. And part of our branding does state that we are not a gym. That's done specifically because we don't operate like a gym. And as you've seen in your DA application and the documentation that we've provided, we're entirely different to a gym and we don't look anything like a gym. OsteoStrong cannot be classified under business and professional services as suggested. We do not in any way offer any consultations. We don't diagnose clients and for any type of illness whatsoever. We are not doctors. Our staff do not hold any national registered medical qualifications. They are not registered practitioners. And on those bases alone, we cannot operate under those provisions. We are not a medical centre. We can be referred to as a fitness centre, as the DA application says. Examples under that classification, in fact, include a fitness centre, which is what we've been classified as, and also a gym. If you look at the definition of a fitness centre, and I've looked it up, it's a place that is geared towards exercise and other physical activities. And a gym, by definition, is a room or a building equipped from gymnastics, games, and other physical exercise. OsteoStrong, in fact, fits both those definitions. To take it one step further, physical exercise can be defined as the performance of some activity in order to develop or maintain physical fitness and overall health. That is, in fact, the whole focus of OsteoStrong, to make stronger bones improve overall health. Whether you're 9 or whether you're 90, it doesn't matter.
Thank you. That's your time.
That's my time. Okay, thank you.
Very much. Lee?
Hi, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm Leanne Cowie, part owner of OsteoStrong. And I'd just like to discuss the core of OsteoStrong is 4 Spectrum machines. And they're state-of-the-art, they're robotic, and which I'm sure you would have seen in the handouts. So just to be clear on how the Spectrum machines work, I'm going to demonstrate my favourite machine. And I want you to imagine that standing next to me is one of our coaches who has been with me through all the other 3 machines. So the last machine is the postural growth machine, and this is what it looks like. That is one of 4 machines that operate in OsteoStrong. A dialogue that we use is very similar with each coach through the Spectrum machines at the same session, at each session, to provide a safe experience every single time. OsteoStrong is for everybody and everybody. We at OsteoStrong hope to make a positive difference in our community, not only for our ageing demographic, but also through all age groups. We'll be rolling out an ambassador program to encourage participation in sports and recreational activities from an early age. With regards to our hours, the reason why we've asked for extended hours is to allow, those hours won't be the same on every day, but it's to allow people who are 9-to-5ers to come in after work to work and access our machines. And once a month we'll be holding OsteoStrong talks after hours to engage and educate the public on osteoporosis and bone health. And I just want to state, or quote, according to a report that is posted on the osteoporosis website, specific to Tasmania. No?
How short is it?
Oh, it's 2 sentences.
Yeah, I'll let you do that, then you can finish, thank you.
2/3 of Tasmanians aged 50 and above have poor bone health or osteoporosis, and many don't even know it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Chloe.
Thanks, Mr Mayor and councillors. Chloe Lyon, 148 Charles Street. Following the refusal of the F45 gym at the site, the property owner managed to find potential new tenants in the OsteoStrong business. So this is not a trying to do a backdoor way of getting the F45 into the site. The F45 have gone elsewhere, and I believe these tenants are a much better fit for the site. I was in chambers when F45 was refused, and my understanding of the debate was the key concern was the early hours, operating hours, between about 5 and 6:30. That's not the case here. They're seeking 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m, with the majority of clients being seen between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m, and further, the number of people at the site at any one time is significantly less than F45. The key concerns of the representatives seem to be the tree removal and the use classification. With respect to tree removal, that issue has been dealt with, and the applicants are quite happy that a condition goes on that retains the pear trees. So then we come down to the use. There's obviously been a lot of discussion around that. Now, I gave this a lot of thought when the representations came in, and I am the most comfortable with the sport and recreation use class, and that's what I would be more comfortable to defend at a tribunal hearing. Some of the representatives suggested it should be a medical centre. However, the coaches are more akin to personal trainers and do not diagnose or treat. The key difference to a gym is that, in the traditional sense, is that all clients must receive one-on-one coaching, and the number of clients at the site at any one time is limited. I remind councillors that they must make a decision on the application before them, and not around speculation about what might go into the site in the future. Proposed condition 10 clearly limits the use of the site for the OsteoStrong business only, and limits the number of clients on site at any one time. Plus, there's another condition around the operating hours. Therefore, any future application at the site for a gym would be discretionary, because it would have to go through a new process.
Good, thank you. That's all the speakers I have. So 9.2, moved Councillor Mackenzie. Oh, sorry. Yep, thank you. Richard just wants to do an explanation.
Yeah, so as alluded to, through some discussions this week on a couple of points of clarification, with the planning officers, we'd like to modify our recommendation to deal with those issues that have been raised with us. And I think you have a sheet with those on, but I'll read them out, is to replace condition 8 as follows. And the change is to allow for the monthly information sessions for up to 30 prospective clients to be held within operating hours. That wasn't specifically dealt with in the recommendation, but given it's a core part of the business, we felt like it was appropriate to clarify that, to allow that to occur. And the second change is to replace condition 11 to make it clear that the ornamental pear trees are to be retained.
Thank you. So with that explanation, you're moving with it. Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Soward. Do you wish to speak to a question, Councillor Mackenzie?
Given the angst that's been in relation to it, I just wouldn't mind the officers just going through the key conditions that are being put on this application to operate the venue, and in the event that any of those conditions were changed in a subsequent application, what a subsequent applicant would need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So if another fitness centre wanted to operate without obtaining council approval, the following conditions would need to be met. Condition 8, the use limitation, which limits specifically the amount of clients on site at any one time. Condition 10, business hours, with the operation between 7:30 a.m. and 9 p.m, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. till 5 p.m, Saturdays and Sundays, and 9 a.m. till 5 p.m, public holidays. Condition 20, which outlines the noise and double glazing of windows. It should also be noted that for a minor amendment to be applied for, it cannot Section 56 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act sets out that it cannot cause an increase in detriment to any person. With that in mind, any changes to the above conditions may result in a detriment to a person and therefore could not be assessed as a minor amendment. A sport and recreation use in the commercial zone is a discretionary use, and therefore any application to operate a sport and recreation use outside of the permit conditions would be subject to a discretionary planning application, which would also require public notification in accordance with Section 57.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and just to that point that you make, that a sporting and recreation permit would require a... sorry, I'll gather my thoughts and I'll go again in a sec. I've lost the train of thought, sorry.
So, Councillor Spencer, is that a question or to speak? No, I've got others first.
Thanks, Mayor.
I've got others first.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to have that clarification because I wonder if the angst would be there if we hadn't had a previous application to do something else. And having sat through the last meeting, and I know the passion of the people who represented that time, and a number of them are here again today, and again, reading some of the representations, most of them, I think all of them, are saying they don't actually have a problem with the particular application that's going ahead and what it is. It's actually the definition of what it's going ahead under is the major issue. And that's why I wanted to get clarification of the conditions and what would happen if anybody else wanted to do it. And I remember standing here making conversation where we actually went against the planning advice on the basis of the hours of operation, the basis of the noise emanated from it. Clearly this is a completely different applicant with a completely different agenda and a different set of circumstances, which in my view reduces the hours of operation, which is the, I guess, the early hours of 5:30 in the morning where car doors are slamming and shutting, where there are no real road traffic, noting the toll, I think, start around 7:30 in the morning going up and down the main highway, so there, or down that main road of Cemetery Street. So the noise at around 7:30 in the morning is starting to build up and being made up of things other than people going to the businesses such as the one that's being applied for today. So from that perspective, I've gone through and I said, okay, that condition works on that. The noise, you know, I was concerned about the doof noise that was coming through the through the concrete and dispersing amongst things. This is definitely not of that nature, and therefore it's also a condition, which is again why I asked for those conditions to be explained to the public, and hopefully the representatives can now see that the actual conditions that are there are going to be completely different to the ones that were the previous application. But as the planner who represented said, we have to make a decision based on what's been put forward as today. Question, fitness centre, sports and rec, whatever it is, that doesn't particularly worry me on the basis that it is probably the most suitable definition based on the Planning Act. But the reality is it's conditioned such that they have a limitation on the uses that they can put in there, and anybody else who wants to put in an application under that guise is going to need to meet those conditions, or otherwise will need to go back through some form of discretionary planning thing, which will then mean it go back to public debate, which then means people can represent, which then means it can come back to us. So there is a long process that can go on which actually protects those people from what might happen into the future, but the reality of it is what's happening today. And in my view, this application actually fits the site. Most of the people who've represented said it fits the site, and they're very comfortable with it. It's their worry about what's going to happen going into the future. I'm prepared to trust the process that says in the event that something does happen and there is a change, that it will go back to our planners and require further review and therefore a discretionary application, which will then mean that the public that I've represented here today will actually be informed of that, and therefore they have their ability to make their own statements in regard thereto. So as a consequence of that, I believe this is a really good fit for that, far better than the previous use that was put there. I think unfortunately some of the angst that went on in regards to that has flowed over into this submission, but I'm very comfortable to support this.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question, because there was a question earlier in the meeting about the car parking spots. Where's the fourth spot is basically what the question was, as per the plans.
In the plans submitted with the attachment, there is an existing plan and a proposed plan. And the existing plan shows 8 car spaces along the cemetery frontage and 6 along the face of the Gunners Arms as it exists, giving 14 spaces in total. The proposal plan shows 18 spaces in total, so it's 4 additional spaces, and they've been created by putting 9 spaces along the face of the Gunner's Arms and 9 spaces along the Cemetery Street frontage. Now, in reviewing that information, it is relevant to point out that in the report at clause 23.4.2, in the performance criteria assessment, it does suggest that there will be no change to the number of spaces along the Cemetery Street frontage, when in fact there will be a change from 8 spaces to 9 spaces. In just assessing that, the change from 8 to 9, I'm not sure will have a significant effect. It's in the same location. It's just narrower, slightly narrower spaces. So I don't think it changes the assessment in the report. In fact, I don't believe it changes the assessment, but it's worth pointing that out, given it was raised in a question. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I thank Councillor Mackenzie, because I think he's covered off really on a lot of things that I was going to raise. And I also want to thank the speakers and also those who did bother to email us, who couldn't be here today. I think it's been great that our officers and the planners, and I really thank them for the clarity that they provided around alleviating some of the concerns there were, because if I put myself in the position of those people who spoke, who live in the area, they would see the words, you know, sport and fitness centre or gym and fitness centre, and straight away they're thinking, hang on, we saw that movie before, we've been there before, and they'd obviously feel some angst around that. I also thank Mr Visser and his business partner for their explanation as well, and I know that in speaking with them and hearing them today, there's been some real clarity around the work that they do, and I, again, think that's really, really important in this. One of the things, Mr Mayor, that has happened, and I know you were in on this email, as were all other councillors, we did receive queries from people around the classification, and I did share the advice, and I do thank Mr Jamieson for the very prompt advice that he gave with councillors on that one, regarding how that classification and use categories got arrived at. I'm not going to read it all through, it's very detailed, but I just wanted to highlight, Mr Mayor, that when categorising the use of development section 8.2.3 of the Launceston Interim Planning Scheme 2015, it explains that if a use or development fits a description of more than one use class, the use class most specifically describing the use applies. Now, what then happened, Mr Mayor, again, as I said, it's quite substantial, and I'm not going to read through all of it. It then goes through and defines sport and recreation, and then it defines business and professional services. And the speakers, Mr Visser particularly, spelled out very clearly what his business does, but Mr Mayor, he also spelled out what his business doesn't do. And I think that's really, really important. So in that document there, I'll say it again, the Launceston Interim Planning Scheme 2015, it offers a definition. Now, sometimes, Mr Mayor, when we're sitting as a planning authority, lots of times, in fact, things come to us and they're nice and easy to fit into a category. In other instances, they're not. And this is one of those instances. Does it mean there's anything sinister by it? No, it doesn't. It just means that, you know, with what it does, it's not easy to slot into a pigeonhole and go, oh, yep, that's it, you can see that. So I think, without labouring the point, it's explained in the planning scheme. We've had the great explanation from Mr Jamieson and his team, and I hope that that has made it really, really clear why it's been put into that category. As Councillor Mackenzie said, if this was something and there'd been nothing before this council in the last little while in the area, perhaps that level of concern wouldn't be there. But I do understand the angst of the residents and those that have contacted us. I'm just going to finish my remarks, Mr Mayor, as I did highlight in the previous one. When you read through what's before us today, and when we're sitting as a planning authority, we need to make sure things comply. We need to make sure they're consistent. And when we read through the documentation, it's very, very clear in the application that's before it, it's consistent, it complies. You know, there's been a lot of work gone into making sure that happens. It meets what it needs to meet. where it relies on performance criteria, again, it complies. So for us today to refuse this, again, would be a strange thing to do. And again, would open it, be taken further and appealed and all the rest of it. So the conditions that have been put in place, to my mind, address the concerns raised by representatives. And again, as Mr Jamieson presented earlier to us, the modified recommendation, again, I think it's very, very sensible with what's been clarified there. The pear trees, which were of concern to some down there, they're to be retained, and also the use limitation. Again, spelled out very clearly what needs to happen. So I thank our staff for their hard work, and I do hope there's some more comments from my colleagues on this one. I'm very interested to hear their thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate the people that want to bring this to the table. I've got a very good friend who will be going to this centre. He's got bad bones and he can't wait till it opens. The opening hours is going to be reduced from 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night, and that's going to be a big thing for traffic. Less traffic. There's not going to be any noise at this centre. And changing the hours, we'll have to go through a DA if they want to open earlier than 7:30. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Yeah, when you say a friend, Councillor Spencer, you're not talking about yourself, are you? Oh, it might have been me. Could be me. I'd like to reiterate Councillor Soward's comments insofar as if this development application was brought in isolation without any history, I don't think we'd be having this elongated discussion. I don't think we would have the concerns on the one hand, and I don't think we would have the elaborate explanations of what the service provides on the other hand, but we're not in that situation. And yet we can't take that previous iteration really into account when we're dealing with this. My concern does go to which I think is the heart of the matter, and that is the zoning and the sport and recreation sort of permit. My concern is that once that is granted, I'm sure I'm reiterating other people's concern, that once that is granted, it somehow sets a precedent that wouldn't be there otherwise. So I suppose that is a question in the middle of my statement, if that's okay, Mayor. Is that the case that it does set some kind of precedent in... Question will be answered after your... Okay, very good. So that is the question that's in my mind, I suppose, in this whole process, and probably for other people too. We've heard that even the representatives are in full agreement that the service is one that's needed and one that's desirable. We've had settled issues regarding trees and foliage and things like that, which has all been good. So I suppose, await that answer to that question that I've posed there, only because I think that's the heart of the matter. That's the only rub. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Richard.
The simple answer to that is that there is no precedent in planning decisions as such. You would expect similar decisions with similar facts to be made, but there is no concept of common law precedent in planning decisions.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, just briefly, I certainly understand the nervousness of the representations that have been presented, both today and in email, and those that have been lodged as part of the application. And it's a nervousness around what happened last time. It's a nervousness around the actions that occurred as a result of the Council's decision last time. So it's certainly be encouraging the business owners to welcome the neighbours into their new premises rather than any other alternative, which is a way of building community and being open for business. But I think what has happened is that the proponents have certainly heard those concerns, and in the case of the pear trees, something that seems simple, they've also been willing to be educated and work with the representations that have been received to change and modify and coexist in that community. And I think that's all the representations are seeking to do, to coexist with no adverse impact to their amenity. And I feel sure, irrespective of a previous decision, which has been dealt with and doesn't impact this one, that this particular outcome is a far better one, whereby issues of amenity are properly controlled within this, within the scheme and within the zone, and within the conditions being imposed.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close.
Yeah, thanks for all of the words emanating from my learned councillors. I guess all I'd just like to finish with, I think, for the people who've represented and the applicants, I hope you see we as a council actually put robust thought into what goes on around this table. That occurred at the last iteration of the last planning proposal that was put before us. It's gone through again today, and I would hope that the fact that we've challenged the officers, they've responded, that sort of understands that we will challenge and we won't just take things for granted in relation to people's rights and responsibilities. But having said that, today we've challenged, we've been given responses, and we're happy with the responses, or I'm happy with the responses that have been received from the officers in regards to what is proposed on the site. And as a consequence of that, I believe it's a good development which should be supported.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. We now no longer sit as a planning authority. Just allow the room to people to leave. Okay, Mayor's announcements. So I just want to first of all say how an exciting day it is for our great city. Today we're able to turn the sod with the Federal Minister for Population and Cities, Alan Tudge, and with the State Infrastructure Growth Minister, and with the university's Vice Chancellor, he is Vice Chancellor, yeah. So all there was absolutely fantastic, and I want to thank, first of all, Councillor Finlay, Mackenzie and Soward for the work that you have done in working on that working group. I think that working group has been very important, especially the last couple of years, where we've come a long way, and you've worked well together to make sure that we get a good outcome. And this is $340+ million that will be spent over the next 3-5 years. Absolutely amazing for our city. It's not only is it the jobs while it's being built, but I think the most important part of this is going to be, hopefully, with more people being educated, going through to further education and lifting the standards of education in our community, which what that does is lifts health, lifts incomes and lifts lots of things. So it's absolutely important for our community. So it was a great day today and a very important step from a long process that we've been going through. And also I just want to mention that on the Saturday the 15th of February, went to the Punch Bowl with the Walk With Us from Tasmania Aboriginal Culture event, and it was absolutely fantastic to see the Aboriginals, their music, their dance, their songs, and then to obviously hear some of their stories and to be able to talk to some of the Aboriginals one-on-one. So it was a really lovely day. That was the first one in Launceston, and I hope it's going to be many more into the future as well. A great way that we as a community get to understand one another and work together better by speaking together, talking together and dancing together.
To Ella French, who spoke to us at the beginning, and again the fact that she, as part of the Emerging Leaders program, I had the pleasure of speaking at that last weekend, and I've done that for the last 4 years. And the group of people that are growing within our community as the emerging leaders, hopefully a lot of those will go into the Tas Leaders program later on, but there's just a huge undercurrent of people who are out there keen to improve their leadership skills and change the world that they live in, I guess is the reality of it. So I was really pleased to listen to her story, and it's good to see that the practicalities of what they did actually translated out into the community. So I just really wanted to give that a big tick and thank Alderman Councillor Gibson or whoever invited her to come and speak to us this afternoon.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor? No? We'll move on. Questions from Councillor? Question, Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, they just actually emanate from comments that were made in the gallery this morning. And one of the things Miss Ives, who spoke about this afternoon even, yes, or somebody else said this morning, I've just got into the habit, talking about the defibrillation unit. I just wonder whether there's a broader question that we should ask, and I imagine we've got a risk management strategy for the gorge, and I just wonder whether, as a part of reviewing that question, we ought perhaps bring back to council what the risk management strategy is on the overall gorge at some stage for us to have a further consideration and just discuss and make sure that it's as contemporary as it could be. So that's the first question. Second question, which was Mr Smith raised a couple of questions in regards to car times and things like that, and one was just in regards to the 1 hour and the parking. I think he was making the comment that the parking app is working very, very well, but it means that you can't go over your 1 hour and things like that. So the question is, and it's often been put back to me, and just to put back for our strategy, I know we're going through the parking strategy at the moment, just to consider whether 1 hour is sufficient time to allow on those car spaces, and whether we should consider looking at a longer time frame for that period. So that's just something I just put back for consideration. And the third one is in relation to Eat Street. I've noticed as I've driven up and down through this summer, Eat Street hasn't really been doing what it did previously. I believe a lot of them it's because they're out doing other things. But I just wouldn't mind us getting a review of that Eat Street strategy and make sure that we as council are doing everything we can just to promote, if that's what we think it is, or just review that the strategy we put in place is still appropriate.
I think the CEO has taken that on board, or will take that on board.
Request for further work, we can certainly we can do it all.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor. At our last meeting, there were a number of people in the gallery regarding the petition with regards to the bus stop being shifted. And I know there is someone in the gallery today from that group. I was just wondering if we had any updates or additional information on where things were at on that one. Thank you.
CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So obviously since the meeting we've been negotiating to find out who we needed to speak to at both State Growth and Metro. We've done that. We've got meetings scheduled next week with both those institutions. We'll have those meetings, gain a clearer understanding, and then obviously engage both with residents and with council after that. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. It has been brought to my attention. I was unaware that that our Queen Victoria Museum does hold some Aboriginal artefacts, specifically petroglyphs, in its collection. My question is to the CEO. I understand that we have made a statement in regards to that in recent months, and there is some action being taken in regards to those artefacts. Could the CEO, either on notice or now, just let the council know what actions are being taken? Thank you.
Thank you, CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So, yeah, the council received a formal request to consider, I guess, the repatriation or the handing back of those assets on the, I think it was 23rd of December. It was late December in any event. We obviously needed to work through our internal processes because, and also liaise with other museums, because TMAG have got a similar artefacts in their collection, which they're currently working through a request to repatriate those. So our process at this point has been to convene a meeting with our Aboriginal reference group, which we did last week, to hear from the different stakeholders involved with the petroglyphs in terms of working out the future of the homing of those. And our plan will be to prepare a report that considers all of the issues and bring that to a workshop and then a meeting of the council to determine how the QBMAG wishes to treat those assets or those artefacts. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, we've got the questions on notice are there from the previous meeting. 13.1, Pedestrian and Bike Committee. I think we have a speaker for this. Greg. Greg Lear? No? Oh. We did have a speaker for it. Okay, we'll move on. So 13.1. Somebody happy to move? Councillor Harris? Seconded. Councillor Spencer? Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Just briefly, the report's in front of you. The highlight was clearly the Tomorrow Together mobility and accessibility transport event that happened in the CBD, where following the Christmas parade we're able to leave the streets around St John Street shut, and it proved very, very successful. There was no negative comment made to anyone on our committee, so from that point of view we're very happy with the concept of perhaps shutting the streets down, and look forward to perhaps seeing what we can do in the same sphere going forward in this next year to perhaps do that again and see how the city can actually function without having cars going through a major shopping area to attract more people back to it.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. Just last week we had another pedestrian and bike committee, and I guess starting off the new year we want to just make sure our relevance in regards to what we do and achieve within this city. As a consequence of that, and I guess the release of the draft transport vision for the community, we felt that we needed to make sure that our committee was aligned with what that strategy was driving towards. And I think going further in regards to the sustainability conversations we're having as a council at large is making sure that the pedestrian and bike committee can fit much more readily into that strategy and give valuable feedback into regards how we take those things forward. So that's the focus of the committee going forward into 2020, to make sure that we're aligned and informed. But certainly, given what I'm reading in recent times, there's a lot for a committee like this to be involved in.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 13.2, Northern Youth Coordinating Committee. Moved Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Just briefly, Mayor, thank you. The 3 dot points I'd like to expand on further, or just highlight for those that perhaps haven't had a chance to have a look. The Door of Hope, a very exciting youth space, multi-youth space with a youth focus, is certainly on the way, and I believe is reaching the DA stage, and is going to be a great facility that the Door of Hope wish to use with other service providers in the north of the state to co-facilitate outcomes for young people during business hours and importantly after business hours. So that's an exciting opportunity, and the invitation was put to a range of stakeholders and service providers present on that day to come into the tent, not duplicate, and work together for our young people. You'll see there the enhanced opportunities this year from the City Missions MISH and MISH Makers program, both happening on-site and outward focused as well, going into different pockets of our community to work with young people. And importantly, I think the opportunity to highlight that we are the only state in our country without an office for youth. And so the Youth Network of Tasmania, with the support of the sector, have certainly been advocating to the state government as we prepare for future budgets to look at how that could be implemented as part of our focus on next generations.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie. Any other councillor wish to speak? Do you wish to close, Deputy? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 13.3, tender review. Councillor Cox moved. Councillor Spencer seconded. Councillor Cox, wish to speak to it?
I'll go only to say, Mayor, that it's fairly self-explanatory rehabilitation work, keeping the people of Kings Meadows happy between Guy and Janet Street, and work that needed to be done, so we got on and did it.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Go on to 14.1. Deputy, you wanted to... Is this the one you wanted to make some changes?
Just a brief change, obviously, to remove the reference to TNT, but importantly to remove the words Q, the abbreviation of QVMAG from in front of the cultural strategy. The cultural strategy is a report for our entire city. Certainly the QVMAG is a significant component, but I want to remove reference to QVMAG before cultural strategy.
So you move it with those changes?
Thank you.
Deputy, is there a seconder? Councillor Finlay. You wish to speak to it, Deputy, at all? Councillor Finlay? Any councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we move on to 15.1. Notice the motion from Councillor Daking. Move, Councillor Daking. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Daking? Oh, we have a speaker. Sorry. Thanks for that. Mr. Robin Smith.
Thank you. Robin Smith on behalf of the Just a few points on look at. This is about a tenancy for a food business with infrastructure in the Brisbane Street Mall. I noticed there wasn't before papers. I don't know if it speaks of offering papers for sale to read, but I know he wasn't able to sell convenience goods and he chose not to sell light food. It was coffee only. And I just want to talk about that it's common in other malls. I'm not sure that it's that common. And this is about testing the market and unknowns and mystery. I'm not exactly sure if there's that much mystery. What the people are asking for certainly is windbreaks, the bandstands to be altered or removed, flags, clocks, all those things we used to have before, greenery, poster pole. We had a policy, and I think it had something like 50 metres from an existing food business. I think that still applies in some regards, certainly to the on-street trading policy. The aromas van, we see certainly that conflict writ large when I know it breaks their heart every day the van pulls in front of them. They have a queue of 5 or 10 people and they have no one. But they're too proud, I guess, to say anything, as I know they would be. The mall trial in 2019 was quite a desperate and hard-pushed trial. It was for tents or vans. We put in for that. We never heard anything back. The concern was whose premises it goes out of. Now, I think if the council was to turn itself into a Brisbane Street Baron and perhaps buy virtual say or any other vacant shop or shop for sale, then I'm not sure how it would feel about having substantial structures in front of that particular tenancy or how the potential tenants would feel. Coffee Republic is in the process, I think, organised by council and installed by council to have umbrellas, and we're doing an application for food. We've got a health licence pending on those in that structure. We've also got a prep food cart constructed, ready to go. Anytime the council wants to try that, you never contacted us. I do appreciate that the councillor is being here somewhat entrepreneurial, even expeditionary in putting this proposal. It's not really driven by the council. It is a councillor that's proposing this, and that does concern me somewhat. We do have a lot of existing food businesses. We did hear from them. You did have a petition. It did spell out that there is sufficient supply there. Toilets is something people ask for, but again, that's not quite suitable for them all. This motion is perhaps about creating a shortcut, just to quickly find out how much the sewerage is and what we can get for it. If we can turn a profit, that's the business plan, I guess, is what it's asking. If you were the owner of a property that did food, you would be concerned. So I'd ask you not to vote for this at this particular time. Something that was driven by the planning, health officers, and mall management would be a policy that would be better to be driven from within council, combining all the other things that we still hope to get in the mall in time. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
That's the only speaker that I do have. Councillor Dakin, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Matt. And thank you to the Speaker.
Sorry?
My role as a councillor, well, why was I elected to council? Simply was largely on the back of the business community and to help activate the CBD in the city. I can't see a better way than helping to activate the CBD is exploring the possibilities and the opportunities that sit within the Brisbane Street Mall. Now, there's no point in me going through the negativity. It's well been presented of the past of what hasn't happened with the mall. I'm more solution focused. I can tell you in the last 7 days or 6 days, I've had nothing but more positive conversations with other councillors, with staff and with the general public about the opportunities that this motion presents, talking about the mall. That's been really, really good. There hasn't been any negative solutions. I say that's been, the past 6 days have been, as I said, some of the best conversations, and I haven't had those in the last 12 months as a councillor. So, the mall. You like it, you don't like it, what is it missing? Everyone has an opinion. My vision for the mall, and I know it's a vision shared by many, is having a vibrant mall. Is having a business within that mall that we can go and have hospitality. A place to meet. I imagine the Queen Street Mall, if anyone's been into Queensland in Brisbane. Now there's a large mall. It has a number of tenancies located within the centre of the mall that you can sit down and have a coffee, that you can actually get a beer and a wine. You can have bite sandwiches. It is a place for people to meet. There is greenery, and I agree that there is more greenery to come that is currently on the way. The CEO has advised me of that. But you've got a space that's been designed, I believe, designed amazingly. I believe we have an opportunity to bring that into the Launceston Mall. But I don't want to get caught up in all of the detail. I suppose that's evident this last week in talking to my fellow councillors. Everyone's got an idea. They'd like to see it to be a marquee. They'd like to see it to be a shipping container. They'd like to see it to be a 3-storey tower, maybe a 2-storey tower. They'd like to see it have toilets. They'd like to see it be big, long, small, short. Now that's fantastic, but I'm simply trying to say, let's just bring that all back. Let's first of all see, what have we got? Where could a potential food business be within the mall? Could we provide the services feasibly with obviously water, power, waste is a big question mark, gas is a big question mark. So before we get caught up in all the ideas and the details of what it could be, let's see first of all, can it happen? Let's start at the bottom. What can happen underground? Can we apply the services? Safety is another one. Can we provide a hospitality or food business within the mall and still have it comply with all the safety regulations? We know we have to get emergency services vehicles through the mall, so can we design around that? So that's what I'd like to do. As far as the design of the motion, making it commercially feasible, yes, we cannot have a business operating in the mall that is competing against existing bricks and mortar businesses that is not paying the same commercial rates, the same commercial rent. These have to be absolutely even. Hence why I've designed and asked the other councillors to talk about the motion in regards to can it be done. So, excuse me, I've probably gone on about simply asking can it be done, can it be done, and can it be done, but I'd like to see a quick feasibility study, a simple feasibility study that's common sense that says, right, this location is identified, we can or cannot provide these services. We then come back and have the detailed discussion of what the next step may look like once we know this information. I'll be interested to hear from my fellow councillors. I know that they have many ideas, many different visions, and I suppose in hopefully doing so, we'll all understand why I've put forward a simple motion of finding out if we can. Because potentially we run the risk of ideas without action, and the mall needs action, not more ideas.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'd just like to just acknowledge Councillor Dakin for actually bringing a more a proactive stance in regards to things. I guess we've all had our own interactions with people regarding the success or otherwise of the mall as it's currently sitting. Most of those have been, why did you build this and why didn't you do something different and you didn't allow this and you didn't allow that. And I guess food has been one of the things that have been high on the agenda of the people that I've spoken to. Is there's nowhere, with respect to Mr Smith, we've got his cafe where we have coffees and things like that and a small amount of eating, but no substantial food offerings within the mall. And I guess that's where a lot of people have questioned me in regard to it. This motion, I guess, seeks to actually challenge whether we can do something along those lines. I understand what he's doing. We went out for food vans. We didn't get any food vans. I take the comments made by Mr Smith at the back there, and I would hope that we have followed that through. But the reality of it is we had a number of kickbacks from fixed food vendors in regards to us putting a potential food van in the mall. So I can understand the nature of what Councillor Lake is putting forward there to say, well, if it's there, it's a commercial thing. So therefore, if it's competing with bricks and mortar, it's doing it on all fours the same as what they are doing. So I can understand all of those things. I guess the key issue is, from my point of view, we've spent a lot of money on City Heart project to this stage, and there's still several phases of the City Heart project to go and a number of things in the wings as we speak at the moment that may change the way we look and think at things. So I guess really what I want to do is make sure this motion wraps itself into the futuristic view of what we're wanting to do there. I can understand timeliness, getting things and moving on and doing stuff, and I guess there's a number of people in the community are saying you've been talking about this for a long time and you haven't done anything. This is an opportunity for us to bring something forward and saying we're going to do something, and this motion, I guess, forces us to do something if we pass it today on the basis something has to be explored. I note the comments by the CEO in regards to the time and the things that he's got on his plate and the ability to sort of deal with that. So I would like the CEO to come back with a timeline as to what's appropriate, and that so that we can work, because I think these things need to be time bound and not sat down and say, okay, well, we're just going to do it and it'll go into the ether and we'll get to it when we get to it. So I think that if we're going to have a motion which has actually got any substance, it actually needs to have a timeline in regards to it. I'm not asking for that to be today. I'm just asking for the General Manager at some stage to come back and give us a process in regards to that if this is passed today, so that we can deal with that. And if there are other projects in and around the City Heart project where it folds into appropriately, then I think it's appropriate that we combine the resources and do them all at once.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Question, Councillor Walker?
I seek to make an amendment to the motion.
And that is? So we know?
Yes, I will let you know. The amendment would be that that we would include the word in front of, in the first sentence where it says tenancy opportunity, to precede that with a permanent tenancy opportunity, and opportunities, I should say, because I would seek to pluralise the opportunities. So it would be to establish a permanent, not a permanent, it would be to establish permanent tenancy opportunities, and to also seek to remove the word food and replace with suitable businesses, because I really believe if we are to investigate this, and we'll find out that very soon, that, you know, it might not be limited to food opportunities in the mall. But I'll wait and speak.
No, you just wait until we see there's a seconder for that.
Yes, thank you.
Is there a seconder for those changes? No, so sorry. No, we can't just do that. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And I know Councillor Mackenzie particularly will appreciate this. Around the table we often quote luminaries from times past, and the name John F. Kennedy often gets mentioned. Well, John Kennedy, do. Don't think, don't hope, do. So I commend Councillor Daking for what he's brought here today. And Mr Smith, I know, is a very passionate advocate for what goes on in the mall. At the end of the day, I know in people that have spoken to me since Councillor Daking's motion has got some coverage, people have said, oh, you know, why would you do that? This may come, that may come, something may happen down the track, or something may not. So at the end of the day, I guess all of us, when we come here, we do so with a proactive spirit in us in terms of doing things, and I think this is proactive. So I recognise obviously that the particular crux of the recommendation is requesting the CEO to do some work, and the CEO in his remarks, you know, does say that, you know, our staff are very busy, they are doing a lot of other work, and that's to be commended. It is something that will take a little bit of time, and that's fine. But I think, you know, we owe it to ourselves to do, as I said, to do something. So thank you, Councillor Daking, and I look forward to seeing the work being done.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I no longer can speak to my amendments, but I'm sure that some of my comments may refer to that, if you'll allow me that indulgence. I do also commend Councillor Daking for seeking to move forward with developing the activation of our mall, especially, in our CBD in general. To first reference Mr Robin Smith's comments, and, you know, I always like to listen to what Robin has to say, and I also take on board that Robin obviously has a very vested interest in the mall, being the only business that's really offering any refreshments, as we know, not really food. But, you know, if we look back and think that we used to have in Myer, a restaurant many years ago, Harris Scarf more recently, Coles before then, Monaghan's, Pages used to sell food as well, and also, of course, the Coffee Republic. We might start to think that, you know, in years gone by, there was a lot of reasons for people to meet in the mall, to have lunch with friends or family or whatever it might be, and that's all fallen by the wayside, councillors. I would like to think that we can find a way, maybe not to replicate that, but to improve upon that. And I do commend Councillor Daking for bringing this forward, because I think that he's really onto something. I think that council have an opportunity to finish the work that they started. I was not on council when the mall refurbishments took place, but I do believe that there is unfinished work there to activate that space, and this may well be a way to do that. And we have a chance to create a temporary solution, which we've explored recently. It doesn't seem to have worked. We have the chance to potentially create a permanent solution. But we could be mediocre in our temporary solution, or we could be excellent in our temporary solution. We could be mediocre in our permanent solution, or we could be excellent in our permanent solution, and that's what I would contend is we need to do. I think we all know, and the CEO mentions in his report, that around Australia there are malls, there are towns and cities that have activated their public spaces in this way, and anything that can take our council towards that, even if it's an exploratory motion such as this, I would encourage. And I would say we do it once and we do it well. We don't compromise on that process. We investigate, we find out what's going to work. We don't become part of the commercial barons, as Mr. Smith is suggesting, but we encourage opportunities for affordable tenancies in an area that otherwise is probably not affordable for small businesses anymore. And that may be another reason why there aren't any food outlets in the mall now, because it's an expensive area to rent a building. So I say do it once and do it well. Seek to design excellence. And I'm sure we can all cite examples around Australia where that has happened in their malls. Have a competition. Seek ideas, seek great ideas in the process. You know, it's not just, as I say, necessarily food. It could be a newsstand, it could be tourist information, it could be a juice bar, it could be, dare I say it, a cafe that sells coffee, it could be a bar, it could be a restaurant, and it could all be all of the above and more. And it could be done in such a way as to not spoil the vistas through the mall. At the moment, those vistas are very, very open, but it could be done in such a way to complement the vistas through the mall. But we have to be brave and bold as a council. We have to have a vision, and it has to be shared, as we all know, and it has to be done with conviction. Our job as leaders in this town is to provide that vision, is to take a step forward, not take a risk, but be prepared to back our conviction. And that's our job, whether we like it or not, is to make those decisions and not to sit back and hesitate and to be risk averse when we know the town is crying out for them all to have something more.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Just a small one, please. I say without activating them all, it may as well cease to exist. We may as well remove it. Turn it back into a street, maybe a bit like the Avenue, because at the moment it doesn't provide any further benefit to our citizens. We want to be the best. We want to be the best regional city in Australia. Then we're going to have the best mall. It's going to have the best features. If it was, you know, a permanently architecturally designed structure, no matter what it would be made of quality materials. It would reflect the quality of our built heritage that we have already. And I'll just conclude by saying the space, it needs it now, and regardless of other programs, whether it be City Heart Project, it will need it in 10 years' time, it'll need it in 20 years' time. It needs to be activated, that space. We've done some work to activate the Civic Square. We are yet to do that work, and I know there are some other ideas in play in terms of activating it, but it will need that, whether we do those other works or not. It will need that activation. So the design needs to stand the test of time and be something that the city and the council can all be proud of. We do it once, we do it really well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to acknowledge the notice of motion that's been put forward by Councillor Dakin today and acknowledge it in the context of his commentary and also the response commentary from the Chief Executive Officer. The thing that's going on in Launceston at the moment, and sort of us as the hub of the greater region, is we're in a really complex environment. There are so many things going on. There's lots of layers of activity, both internally in our own organisation, where we relate with others across the region, in our city, at the river, moving down to Inverest. There's lots and lots going on, and what we're looking for with the passioned speeches is the heart of that to be, you know, as vital as possible. And so the intention of the motion is really sound. I feel like there's so many things going into the top of the funnel at the moment, and reflecting on the CEO's comments, it's sort of like we're almost a bit crammed to be able to actually deliver out the quality that Councillor Walker is asking for without adding perhaps more burden or more less desirable outcomes. So hearing what the CEO has said, and if the mover is able to acknowledge in his closing remarks an acknowledgement of the timing of our capability and resources. We've just gone through a massive organisational shift. We've got some great people who have come into the organisation, but we've also got organisational vacancies. In order to continue to deliver quality on all of the things we've already committed to, and recognising this is really important, I suspect that quite a few strategies, projects, intentions will come together and perhaps may seek to provide a solution to this and other areas around the city. So I think it's worthy of support, subject to respecting the capabilities within the organisation in terms of resource to deliver. And I would suspect that a whole range of things will weave together to create the outcome intended.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. It was interesting. I didn't know where I was going to stand on this particular motion, even after talking to Councillor Daking before the meeting. But I think in weighing up what most people have said, I will be supporting this motion. But like others have said, we do need to recognise that this is additional work to be done by the CEO or his staff. I'm sure his staff will be good at delegation. But it is work that is very important to know, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's under the tiles of the mall, and we don't really know whether in fact it is possible to connect trade waste and things easily, or is it going to cost us $1 million? So this report doesn't have to be war and peace. This report simply has to answer the basic questions of, if we were to locate something in the mall, where would it be located, how it would access the services it needs to operate, and then from that you would then decide whether in fact you would go ahead and at what price per square metre. As we've travelled around, and I'm sure many of us have, both overseas and throughout Australia, I always found that whether I was in Europe, you would head for the city square. When you're in Brisbane or any of the other Queensland cities, I always found myself heading for the mall as the centre of activity. And interestingly enough, in most of the regional cities of Queensland, they are very similar to our own mall. They all have empty shops and not much going on. But it is in fact where tourists head, and it is something that we need to address. So I do look forward to seeing the mall being more active, because it does certainly need it. I listened to what Mr. Smith said he has on plans, and we look forward to having something like that there. But I also realise that this may not be just simply a food van. What we may be looking at is a permanent structure that might be there in perhaps more of the Adelaide Mall type of food and wine and beer and all that sort of thing type of outlet. But we've got to do first things first, so let's take the first step. I really do like the idea. We have a UTAS School of Architecture here. If we ever get to the first base, let's use the School of Architecture to perhaps design something that is very worthy, as Councillor Walker said. So with that, I'll say Well done, Nick, and look forward to the opportunity to vote on it.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I congratulate Councillor Dakin for bringing this forward. There is no question that the mall is a topic of conversation irrespective of where you go. We've had one go at it, and if you talk to some people, they'll suggest that we didn't quite get it right, and I won't comment on that one way or the other. This hurts me, but I listened to Councillor Dickinson a moment ago. I'd like to add and say, me too. It worries me when I start to agree with her so often and so frequently.
Even if it was her old name.
Yeah, well, if it was her old name, that's right. Yeah. Well, Councillor Janey. A lot of work has gone on over the years, and as I said, we didn't always get it right. There is work at the moment that has to be done. Whether we jump in now and do it, as Councillor Dakin is suggesting, or whether we take a deep breath and let the council work through the work that's currently underway, because there are some announcements that are being made, and I would hate to think that we muck this up because we went early on something that was going to come up in the foreseeable future. So whilst I support the idea, I've had a big think about this, well, I totally support this idea, and I think some of the ideas that you've got are excellent, and I have no doubt they will be implemented as time goes by, hopefully not too much time. We need something, and I guess everyone's aware, where people can come back and meet in the mall. Not just Coffee Republic, but other places. There was a shop in Launceston. They had a lovely restaurant upstairs. That closed. All the people from the country don't go there anymore, so they don't come into the mall. They go somewhere else. And I've got no doubt that that's part of the plan that the executives of this council have in mind. So I look forward to seeing what they put forward in the next few weeks. And I look forward to seeing how we implement that with the plans that Councillor Dakin also has for the betterment of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm going to circumnavigate the rumours and announce here that the announcement is very simple, that the clock is going to be installed in the mall in the next couple of weeks.
With a carousel.
The General Manager, Shane, has sent me an email, and I'm sorry if I've broken any, in confidence announcements, but the clock is coming, and that is a very exciting announcement and one that I'm looking forward to. I thank the people that have spoken before me. The other thing that I wanted to say, I don't have much to add to the debate, but I just wanted to say, because I hadn't spoken, and at risk of being thought of that person, it wasn't me who suggested that the mall could be turned into towers, and I just wanted that to be clearly articulated and known. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy. Any other speakers? Councillor Dakin, you wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to all my fellow councillors for speaking today to the motion. I really do appreciate it. I'd especially like to thank Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Walker for articulating far better than what I tried to do their vision of the mall and the reasons why I've got to this stage. And I've had many discussions with both of you over the last few days and with the other councillors too. With regards to the time frame, CEO, I've got no problem in discussing that offline with you. I can agree with you in regards to putting a definitive time frame with the current workloads and future workloads coming up. That makes sense. I would not like to see it drag out past 6 months, but again, I'll wait for you to talk to your staff, and then would it be appropriate to come back to us with a timeline? I see this potential development, as Councillor Walker said, there for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Now, it may change, but the mall is going to be there hopefully for the next 10, 20, 30 years. You never know. It's been there for a while now. And the city needs it. I think if we're to stand here as councillors and do nothing, then what are we here doing? I'm here to do something. And I strongly believe that this is a sensible approach to getting somewhere. When we don't have the Taj Mahal design in front of us right now, we're not voting on it. We're simply saying, we're identifying that we believe a food business is worth looking at constructively. How do we get it there? If it can't physically go there, well then let's not have the conversation. So let's, again, find out what we don't know, take the mystery out of it. It's one of my favourite sayings. come back with the information and then have a discussion. So I thank you all for your support, and I'll sit down.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I think that's all councillors present. That is carried. We move on to 16.1, the Leisure and Aquatic Centre. Move Councillor Soward. Seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Soward?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And I'm going to start my remarks by just congratulating our staff for the significant amount of work that's gone into this. And it's quite a comprehensive piece of work. What's in front of us today, Mr Mayor, is that we're dealing with a situation that provides in-principle support for the installation of a heat pump and solar photovoltaic system at the Launceston Leisure and Aquatic Centre, and we agree that the project be included in the 2019-20 Capital Works program. Now, Mr Mayor, one of the, there's a little bit of history around this. I'm going to start with the most recent history and then work back. So, previously in 2018, a review into what we're using up there at present, indicated that it's unlikely to provide a positive financial return beyond 2020. So, as we all know, and we know that this energy space is a rapidly moving one. Things change quickly. I was around this table when that cogen system was put in, and that was flagged at that time as being a real U-Butte thing. Things change, gas and all sorts of other things out of the control, I should say, of this council. And whilst we saved some money, we weren't saving the money that was forecast that we would save. The work that's gone into this before us today highlights that engineering and financial modelling undertaken by council indicates that the introduction of a heat pump and solar voltaic system is a financially attractive opportunity that, Mr Mayor, will reduce the council's energy expenditure. Now, one of the great things I reckon about council, we advocate and we try and guide other people what to do with their practices. How good is it if, as a council, we're not just saying to people, be energy conscious, be aware of things like climate change, but we're actually doing this stuff ourselves. And as you read through this report, Mr Mayor, on page 81, it talks around the cost of this particular system. But what it says, Mr Mayor, more importantly, is it reduced the centre's operating annual costs by $413,000 in year one, working its way through to $502,000 by year 5. So I'll say that again, reducing the annual operating costs. Is that this council being responsible, Mr Mayor? Well, I think it is. I think it is. We're not standing here as a council saying to people, you need to be energy conscious, you need to be doing these things. We're doing it. We're doing what we're asking others to do. And all of us around this table, I know, when we stood before the people a couple of years ago now, we all talked about making council, in our own ways, of course, we all talked about making council, spend ratepayers' money better, save ratepayers' money. Well, here's one we prepared earlier, Mr Mayor, right here in front of us, something that it does exactly that. So I won't get into all the technical detail is in the report, but as I said at the start, I commend our officers on the work that they've done. And again, it is a rapidly changing environment. It is something that, what happened 5 years ago isn't the world today. But as it spells out very clearly on page 83, there are significant financial benefits, significant environmental benefits, so a significant reduction in our overall emission. The centre energy is derived from 100% renewable resources. 100% renewable resources, so again, a very, very positive outcome. Reduced operational expenditure. The solar systems of up to 100 kilowatts receive small-scale technology certificates, significantly reducing purchasing cost, and the combined payback period of approximately 4 years with the monies we save to pay for things. So I think it's terrific. As I said at the start, and again, commend our staff for their hard work on what they've brought before us today. I'm excited, Mr Mayor, about the fact that we are doing what we can to save money for our ratepayers, but also to be environmentally responsible, and again, meeting our commitments under the Council's Climate Emergency Declaration from last year. So delighted to support it. Look forward to the other discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
I'll start by saying I love graphs and numbers. And I love numbers which turn from red to black even more. So I think, the report is really well done, but I want to start where Councillor Howard stopped, which was at the declaration we made last year, which was about climate emergency. Again, we need to live the dream in regards to that. We made that statement, and I believe we as a council have taken that oath seriously and moved into a sustainability focus in what we do, in everything that we do. And that was, I guess, if you go back to look at what we did in the workshop last week, the sustainability start. This is a great start in moving towards achieving the goals of our carbon neutrality going forward. And again, if you look at the graphs, and the graph I like, the one is the red and the blue one, where the red and the light blue and the blue one, where it talks about our electricity and our gas usage and our total usage. And if you look around all the facilities within the council at the moment, the light blue, which represents the gas, is significant when it comes to looking at the aquatic centre, whereas the other areas around the city are much lower requirement of gas, which is not climate friendly as it is in relation to solar and hydro. It's interesting, our conversation last week was talking about, and because we are in Tasmania, most of our electricity comes from renewables, so therefore for us to move from hydro to solar, we get no benefit from a carbon footprint point of view. But in this case we do, because we're moving from gas to solar, which does give us that point of view. It surprises me that the system works the way it does. I think we're putting a 99 kilowatt or whatever generation unit on the top of the swimming pool, where we can put something like 365, I think, or some number. Yet it's more cost effective for us to do a smaller than a large one. That doesn't quite make sense to me in my numbers world, but the reality of it is, with the way the government rewards us for using this particular facility is the best size for what we're going to do from the point of view of returning the best bang for our buck. The beauty about that is, once we've set this up, we've got the infrastructure set up there, which will enable us, when hopefully time comes where we can look at other renewable activities with regards to solar energy. We have a beautiful base plant up there which we can build upon, hopefully, for that purpose. Again, as Councillor Howard said, the beauty about this is, because of the energy and the way that it comes through to us, it is much more cost efficient than the current cogen system that we have. The beauty about the process that we went through is, we looked at the system we went through when we decided to go into the cogen plant. We learned some lessons along the way, and it's all very easy to look in hindsight and say, well, if we'd known that now, we wouldn't have done what we did. And there are some things now in hindsight we may not have done the way we did do them. The beauty about it in the report and the way the officers went about it is, they went back and they said, what did we learn from the last process that we went through that we can apply to the current process that we're going through now? And I believe they articulated those extremely well, and it's articulated in the report. So the positive out of this is that we're going to get savings to get a capital payback within 4 years, and maybe less than that, depending on how much the sun shines and various things like that, and other things. We'll get a big bang back for our buck. But the more important aspect of it is, and I always say, whenever we spend a capital project, it's what the ongoing operating costs to the organisation are the key elements to it. Because you can buy something, get it up nice and cheap, and you get a payback on the capital very quickly. But if your operating costs are significant going forward compared to an alternative, then you lose over a longer period of time. And we've got some projects now where with beautiful, nice, shiny stuff, but we're now having to find the money to pay for the upkeep and so forth on it. The beauty about this is that the cogen system was actually costing us money, and this particular facility, based on the research that's been done on an ongoing basis, is going to cost us less on a maintenance cost. So we win on the capital cost by being repaid very quickly on the energy savings, but we're also going to save on the ongoing operating costs of the deal as well. So it meets our climate change initiatives, sustainability going forward, and more importantly, it's going to be cheaper.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. The two previous speakers have really said all of it, but I'll just reiterate that, this is just about not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk as far as climate change goes. The payback in 4 or 5 years, I'm sure Paul would love those numbers, because it would save the ratepayers money. It is by far the lowest hanging fruit that we have hanging to make a difference as far as our footprint goes, our carbon footprint. And the government policy of, whether it should be 99 kilowatt hours or megawatt hours or whatever it is, government policy is never about what's right or wrong. It's always about what's possible. So you just take what is possible and move on from that. So I think this is to be congratulated. The officers have done a fantastic job on their report. I had a lot to do with TasGas in the early decade of after 2011, and they were very keen on the cogen thing, and it was the great hope of the time, but it hasn't proven out to be quite what it is. So we now need to cut our losses and move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I congratulate our council officers for working through this, and I encourage people who are listening to today's meeting to have a look at the agenda and have a look at the report that goes with this particular item. Of course, it's a no-brainer. It's really straightforward. When you look at the graph, and unlike Councillor Mackenzie, I'm not a big one for graphs or numbers, but in this case, you look at the graph and the energy use of the aquatic centre dwarfs most or all other council activities, probably put together. So, you know, again, congratulations to the officers. It's a changing world energy market. When we did enter into the cogen arrangement, it might have been the case that the price of gas was a lot cheaper and things like that. It's something that's beyond our control, but I will make the point that so too is the price of hydroelectric power. Councillor Mackenzie says that, you know, in terms of our commitment to creating more sustainability, it is a good thing that it will either be coming from hydro or now in this case solar, as per the panels that will be installed on the aquatic centre's roof. But the problem there being that while it'll be our own solar power we'll be using, we'll still be dependent from another entity for that hydro power, and that price may change over time. Indeed, it does change over time. You know, if you're worried about your own energy bills at home, you probably should have a look at the council books and have a look at the energy bill that this council paid. It's massive. So I would encourage the officers to continue this work. I'm sure they have many, many ideas, and maybe, you know, fellow councillors do too, that we have the opportunity here to not just for the council's power use, but also for our community's power use, to look at the possibility of solar farms, community-owned solar farms, to look at the possibility for the council to actually assist its residents to invest in renewable energy for their own properties, just as we are doing in this property. You know, in a sense, what we're doing is just what a household can do on a very large scale. So we're fortunate, and you know, we're very lucky that we can do that. We have the facility there to do it. We look at other councils around Australia, and you'll find many examples where those councils have invested in community power schemes, where they have given incentives to their residents to take control of their own power consumption and their power costs. So wherever possible, I'd certainly like to encourage that. It certainly may not pay the same dividends as what this will, but if in this changing world we can get ourselves away from commodities that are beyond our control, then by all means, both for the council and for our residents, I believe we should encourage it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the organisers that brought this up. Being a spark, it gives electricians work. I love it. And I've got to commend our accountant, Paul. He's going to have to change the figures for us, and I know he can do it. But this is going to save us a lot of money over the next 5 years. So hopefully Paul can do it for us. Thank you.
With a name like Paul, anything's possible. Any other speakers? Councillor Sauer, you wish to close?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I could see the smoke coming off Mr Gimple's calculator as Councillor Spencer was speaking then, but in all jokes aside, it's terrific what's before us today. I look forward to, as I said, saving ratepayers' money. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. One's even got two hands up, so that's passed. 16.2. Move Councillor Mackenzie. Is there a seconder? Councillor Finlay, thank you. So 16.2 to level 1, 47A, Brisbane. Councillor Mackenzie, you wish to speak to it?
Oh, I did. I must admit, when I read this, I had no idea what it was I was reading. But I do have a little bit more of an understanding, I think, of what's going on here. is the reality of it is I think that where you have leases over, I think 5 years or 10 years, it needs to come to the authority to actually approve. And I think it's all based around the fact that there's some ability, I guess, if you put 99 to 100-year leases on things, it's sort of pseudo acquisition without having to pay stamp duty. So I think that's why it comes back back to the authority. This is simply a matter, I think, of a business that sits beside another business who wants to use the first floor of the business next door and wants to invest in a lift to get themselves from the ground floor to the first floor and then go into the building adjoining. And it is simply, I guess, because they're going to have to incur capital costs to put a lift in, that they wanted a longer term lease. And anybody who can get a 15-year lease on a first floor property in Launceston, I'm very much in favour of supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 17.1, the QV MAG activity update. Deputy Mayor. Moved, seconded. Councillor Soward, do you wish to speak to it, Deputy Mayor?
Look, other than to say how exciting it was to receive this really comprehensive report and details, I guess, the forward momentum that is occurring through the programs and the recruitment of new staff and the changes of focus of the QV MAG at both sites. And, you know, I think what this does is sets us up in a direction that we're all collectively working towards. We know that the cultural strategy is about to come. We know that further works are being undertaken with regard to the sites, and it's referenced in there with regard to the Phenomena Factory and other exciting exhibitions that are coming. And I think what this does is just puts on our horizon the responsibility that we have as members of this council for these great institutions, the two sites of the institutions. My only encouragement would be, it says that it's an annual initiative. I would love, of course, for it to be, you know, perhaps a monthly initiative or even quarterly. But needless to say, this was a great review and indicates that there is always plenty going on at our QV MAG.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to echo the words of the Deputy, I mean, in some ways, I say it's a quiet achiever. I mean, it's an institution in this city, there's no doubt about that. But it's something that I think sometimes with all the other, you know, one-off sort of things that happen, people sort of, I guess, not forget it, but perhaps don't value it as much as we should. So to see what's in front of us today spelled out very, very clearly, I think is really important. I was also very, I guess, astounded at the generosity of Professor Coleman O'Flaherty, former chair of the TSIT and a very long-standing educator, his generosity with the bequest in memory of his late wife Nuala of $250,000, which is a significantly generous, hugely generous gift, which funds a keynote speaker annually or biannually to present a significant cultural and/or academic event held under the auspices of QV MAG. There's not too many things that come to council that you've lost for words on, but that's one of them. Just a person who's given a significant amount of his life to this city in a high performing role, but to establish that in honour of his wife is a really remarkable thing, and I look forward to seeing the significant cultural or academic event that that funding helps to support. But wonderful work, Tracy and her team out there, and it's great to have it presented that way. I won't put as much pressure on for a monthly one, but you know, a frequent update is terrific because, again, as I said, I think it is something sometimes we do all take for granted, and we shouldn't. It's a wonderful institution. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
I think because it's the first time it's been on the agenda in the history of the many, many years that I've been at council to have an update, other than the annual report that we receive at the time that we have our annual general meeting. And if there's decision points to come, it's almost going to be boring that I'm going to say the same as the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gibson and Councillor Soward. But the content of the report is fantastic. So the activities that are occurring are to be commended. It's great to see a new energy and direction there, and the action that's happening. I have to say, though, having read it, I love using my highlighter and my pen in my report, and I didn't have anything to highlight or to scribble over because it was all just really great to hear. We do get updates, obviously, in the councillor bulletins, and that's important for us. But one of the key things with bringing on supporters and advocates in the community and upping visitation and membership and support and bequests and other things is about communication. So the only thing that I did actually pre-mark up while I was reading was fantastic to have it here, but that it being an annual initiative, I actually think it's in the best interests of the institution and all the amazing things that we do that it's actually more regular, and I'd really encourage you to consider that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.1, Lease Summerhill Scout Group. Move Councillor Finlay, seconded Councillor Cox. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Finlay? Councillor Cox. Question, Councillor Mackenzie.
See, I hate this question, but the reality of it is I mean, I'm supportive of the motion. I think a year or so ago we talked about trying to capture the value of what we give to the community, and I guess that as these come up, and this applies to 19.2 as well, we've had a number of these leases, as to how we're capturing the value proposition, and as we review them, would be a good opportunity to find out what the real value of that lease is and put it into a document which sort of starts to demonstrate that. So I don't know whether that's something that we are currently doing, but it seems to me that as we do these things, it would be an ideal time to capture that.
Good, thank you. Is that a question or
it was a question?
Oh, sounded like a statement to me.
I've got to stand up, sorry. Thank you for the question, Councillor Mackenzie. As part of the organisational restructure, we have centralised our leasing and licensing management for our organisation. As part of that centralisation, we're absolutely working on identifying the cost or the benefit to the community of some of the lease arrangements that we have for the organisation, with the view to be able to actually ultimately report them as part of our annual report, so that it's clear that the support we provide to the community is beyond that of the budget that we invest on an annual basis.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, you wish to speak?
I'll go only to say that there have been many years. I'm not sure this county is as popular as it used to be. I don't know. I imagine it still must be fairly popular or they wouldn't be operating the way they do. But I would think the fact that they are doing what they do would be beneficial to the community.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No, I'll put them. Oh, Councillor Finlay wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour. That is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.2, lease first tamer Sea Scouts. Move Councillor Finlay. Seconded Councillor Cox. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Finlay?
I did wish to speak to this one, and I think last time it came up, and maybe even a previous iteration of this lease renewal, the document that we've got and the structure and everything is consistent with all of our policies, and so great. I've always wondered in the back of my head, with some of the organisations that lease some of our properties, it might be that there's a unique circumstance for either our organisation to support them to seek grant funds or something to help with the presentation of the property. The property's really well maintained, it's really well looked after, it's really well used, but it's right on our prime waterfront. And I wonder if it wasn't actually one of our properties and it wasn't leased by the Tamar Sea Scouts, whether in fact it would present as it does. It's a random sort of question to ask, and I know it's not necessarily the right time, but I wonder somewhere in the future, with all of your great capability and time, whether that's sort of something we could ponder along there, whether... I don't know whether they've ever thought about it. I don't know whether there's ever been any approaches, but this is a 5-year commitment. And so in 5 years' time, I imagine there'll be all sorts of other developments in and around the river and with the university and all that sort of stuff. I just thought it was worth noting.
Thank you. I will note it. Councillor Cox? Sorry. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all present. That is carried. 19.3, Code for Tenders Act. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, I do. It's a really good document, and I'm really pleased it comes to the council table because the public can see that it's a really good document, I think, if they spend the time reading it. we often get criticised about how things get done in council and whether everything's done in a proprietorial way. But the reality of it is this is a really good document which demonstrates exactly how we go about things. And again, I think the highlighted things are the things we've amended and improved it. So the whole thing is continual improvement is always a really good thing. So I think my reading of the document, people should have comfort that the council is conducting its business in a sound manner. It explains how we go and why we go to tender, the levels that we go to tender and how we get quotes and all those sorts of things through it. I think it's very demonstrable what goes through that. My only question that I had as I was reading through it is just only, if I could just finish with a question, was it item 9? It says extension of contracts entered into by tender. Consistent with Regulation 23.5, council may extend a contract entered into as specified in the original contract documentation, or if the contract does not specify extensions by an absolute majority. Does that mean it comes back to council, or is it dealt with at tender review committee, because that's where it's tended to be done in the past?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mackenzie. There's a delegation to the Tender Review Committee in place, a formal delegation to the committee in terms of decision making. It's reflected that way in the document, so that if the Tender Review Committee wished to refer it to council, that it was clear that that could happen in both instances.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay?
Just supporting all of the comments of Councillor Mackenzie, and he framed it in a very positive way. The other thing that I wanted to speak to in this item is, if in the past, if there have been any reflections on or perceptions of council decisions, it's always been where we've looked to manage risks and improve safeguards. And I think the language in here that's been included is very much around being positive in the structures and having all of that probity and accountability and openness, but it also very clearly articulates the safeguards in there and manages those risks. So thanks for those improvements.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer?
Thanks, Mayor. One thing I like in this document, it's gone the same as what we do at schools. 1,000 to 10,000, you've got to have one written quote, which is great. One question, who do we get to audit the work that is performed under these? We've got an auditor that goes in and checks to see if these people have done the right thing and whatever. Question?
Have you finished speaking?
And one other question to the CEO, he can authorise work in an emergency. Would that mean a flood or a fire or?
We'll answer the questions.
I'll do the first one.
Yep.
I'll do the first one. Thank you, Councillor Spencer. In the event, I've lost your first question.
Audits, to
yes.
check on the work.
So we have internal audit processes and internal reports that go to management to look at purchasing decisions that are made within the thresholds on a regular basis, and it's a sort of a red-green type reporting scenario, so we can see where there are anomalies that don't meet our policy requirements. Additionally, we have an internal audit function that periodically reviews services we provide across our organisation, and on occasion we have specialist audit conducted on certain functions, which is what we did with the KPMG audit last year into our procurement approaches.
Mr Mayor, yeah, so the emergency provisions are very, very rarely adopted. So my time as General Manager both here and Waratah, the examples would be here. We utilised them when we had the levy failure and we needed to actually act quickly based on the risk that posed to Invermay to rectify that. And at Waratah Wynyard, when we had the floods and we lost 5 bridges, we used the provisions at that time just to hasten, particularly in areas that were completely cut off. So that's the type
I understand fully.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perhaps the fence was falling down.
Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to highlight something. I often talk around the table about using educative processes, and it would be a foolish alderman a councillor to get into operational matters, but wouldn't it be wonderful if this is passed today, which I feel very confident that it will be, that through our wonderful social media channels, that we get this message out there, because as Councillor Mackenzie said, this is a very, very rigorous document. It spells out very, very clearly how things are done. You know, I'd love for some out there who don't understand these things to improve their knowledge and learning around it. There's a lot of rigour in what we do. It spells out very clearly how that happens, and I think anything we can do to educate the community how this council operates in this area would be a discussion well worth having. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
All we need to do is live the document.
All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.4, the response to the state grants. Moved Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I'd love to. I tried to raise this with the Premier on Tuesday, I think, but I think it's great that we actually get an opportunity to put this out in the public face, because often the conversations we have regarding the state grants are things where we go and submit in camera, largely where we go and talk to the State Grants Commission about some of the issues that we face as a city. And I really, I'd like to congratulate the writings that have been put together there, because it does highlight the uniqueness of what Launceston has to go through every year in regards to what it supports through its rate base, which is different to pretty well every other council in Tasmania. And I think that, this response is important, and I hope the ratepayers of Launceston actually read this and use whatever power they might have to influence outcomes so that we are less prejudiced in the way that we're dealt with.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay?
Yeah, so my comments on this were more around the processes that have been through, the report that was written, and in fact, and now that Councillor Mackenzie has spoken, I'm thinking I've done all of this writing based on what I thought was the meeting that we'd been to, and what you've spoken there, you didn't mention it, so now I'm like a bit confused. But this came out of the meeting that we went to, right? Down at Inverett. Yeah, correct. So I think I came away from the meeting when we actually presented our case, never confident that in fact we would be taken seriously and there would be efforts where we could see a positive outcome taken. But having read the report, I feel that they actually heard us really clearly. I feel that the references to the City of Launceston within the report are understood, that our unique scenario, even though there are other similar situations of a lesser degree in other areas, were respected and acknowledged, and that they've moved through the 4 different sort of possible actions, with the favourable one of being scenario 4, that subject to the work to happen could work for us. It's all subject, of course, to our own review of governance around QVMAG and UTAS. But it seems that scenario 4 is really sound, it's data-driven, it's also able to be reflected and amended as things change. So I'm looking forward, this is sort of like the beginning of another process. The CEO will submit by the 28th of February our comments around this, and I'm hopeful that it could see us moving forward in a way that we haven't been able to in a really long time.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Finlay. Any other speak? Councillor Walker?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And, to reiterate Councillor Finlay's comments, it does seem to augur well for the future for our council. It is, and she did refer also to the, our somewhat unique circumstances. Having other councils on our doorstep means that, we are providing a lot of services for people who aren't necessarily in our municipal area. We all know that. It can lend itself to a whole heap of other discussions, which we won't go into today. But it is encouraging that we, are being listened to in that respect. I note with interest that the tourism cost adjustment is touted to be removed, recognising the fact that tourism expenditure is probably something that happens across the board in Tasmania. Similarly, what's being recognised, I suppose, is, what we expend in Launceston is something that is, for the benefit across the broader northern Tasmania region, and I think that is the most salient point in all of this. We can't, completely correct, past decisions and occurrences where, different municipal borders have been created. We, I think, do a great job of maintaining the facilities we do have that are listed in this report. Indeed, we go to the extent of adding things to that list so that, you know, we're not adverse to taking a step forward and doing things that do benefit the whole region. I suppose, you know, a case in point might be the new playground down at Riverbend Park. So that will continue. You know, I don't imagine as a regional centre are going to step away from that role and responsibility. But it's nice that it's being recognised. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.5, delegation from council to CEO. Councillor Cox moved, seconded. Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Cox?
I'm going to say that I think it's a very sensible and logical process in line with things that we've done in the past. My only concern, I've got to say, Mayor, is I've looked at section 204 and we're authorising to pay costs as ordered by the court. I'm just wondering if there's something he wants to share with us.
Councillor Finlay? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. We'll close the meeting. Thank you.